Okay, good morning, everyone. It's, I think, 1 minute past the scheduled time to start this webinar. Welcome all to our webinar on disaster risk information management in Asia and the Pacific, developing capacities and enhancing collaboration. My name is Letizia Rossano. I'm the director of APDIM, and APDIM, as you know, is the Asia Pacific Center for the Development of Disaster Information Management. As we get started, maybe a few housekeeping questions or points. Please mute your microphones, and if you wish to keep your videos on, you're most welcome so that we can see you, and as we make various points in discussions, we can get a sense of how these points are coming across, and we hope to make this an interactive. Thank you, Aurelio, for turning your video on. We hope to keep this an interactive discussion, so please do use the chat line for any comments or questions. We are monitoring it to make sure we can come in and capture your contribution. And of course, do raise your hands if you have any comments or wish to ask any questions. With that, Ava, if you would like to share again the key, the program, we can, I can walk you through. Our plan for today is to have the first presentation, have some questions after that, and then we'll take the following two presentations and questions after those two, since the topic of those second two presentations is both on sand and dust storms. Before we get started, in order to break the ice, and I see there is some oh my God, 62 people in the chat, in the conference. So we're very pleased that so many of us. So we figured we could break the ice. So we have two quick questions surveys for you, just to get a sense who are these 63 people and counting around the virtual table. If we can, you should have something popping up on your screen now. Which asks you to identify whether you work for a national government, an international organization, if it's popping up. If not, no problem at all. Ava, is it working?
Yeah.
We had planned a little ice breaking.
Hello, Ms. Rossana. This is Shah Mohammed Nassim from Bangladesh.
Yes, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome, sir. Welcome, sir. There you go. We have now the form. So just click on your affiliation and submit, and we should be able to see the results as we go. I am from an international organization, so I click submit. All right. So we have majority of you, I see, is from international organizations, but we do have a good contingent, as Shah Mohammed Nassim from Bangladesh just pointed out. There's a growing, lovely growing, oh yeah, great. It's going to 11% now, a growing contingency. So please do submit. When you click, also press submit, and it's nicely spread out. Okay, we have 41 out of 70 people in the call who submitted their votes. So if you do have a moment, press done or submit on your form. All right, so we have I think a good spread, a good representation also from national government. That makes me very happy, because that's what we are here for. Of course, international organizations, it's great to have colleagues and partners interested in our work, some from academia and independent researchers. That's lovely. All right, so then, as we are now at 75 people, we are done with this, and we have another one, as hopefully simpler one. And this is because initially we had planned to have this webinar as a 2-day intense workshop in Tehran. You know, APDIM is based in Tehran, in Iran, and Iran's hospitality is legendary. And so in order for us to prepare to hopefully welcome you very soon in Tehran in person, we have the next poll is about what you prefer to drink during webinars. Is that up yet? Coming up soon. There you go. Hopefully. There you go. Here is the form. So what's your preferred choice of drink during a webinar? Tea, green tea, coffee, water. I got my water here as I'm expecting to do a little bit of talking. Yeah. And other. So go for your choice and submit. And there we go. We got a few votes there. Lovely. Meanwhile, we're 76 in the chat. Thank you, sir, from Bangladesh. All right. So we got, I can see that majority likes coffee with even tea and water, some juice, and for the other, we'll make sure we have plenty of hot chocolate when you come to Tehran, or get in touch if your preferences are different. So thank you so much for this. And off we go. We can now get started with the first presentation. Again, the main slide, Ava, if you don't mind, so that we can together read the title, as these are long, complicated titles. And the first slide is findings of a preliminary assessment on the gaps and needs for disaster risk information and data management platforms in Asia and the Pacific region. Sahar Safaiz, the director and principal consultant at Sage on Earth Consulting, who will do this presentation. We had commissioned this study in APDIM less than a year ago, because we wanted to make sure we understood what was the landscape in terms of risk information management in the region. We, for short, amongst ourselves, we call it the supply and the demand. Where is the information? Who is using it? Is there enough demand? And if not, why not, etc. And Sahar has been really focusing on the question of using and apply risk information for many years. So we thought she would be ideal for this work, and indeed we were very pleased with the assessment, and we took a lot of that outcome of the assessment in informing the developing APDIM's own work program. So with that, and we're now 80 in the call, that makes me very happy. With that, I'll give the floor to Sahar for her presentation. Sahar, I know you're there.
Yes, thank you so much, Leticia. I just need to start sharing screen. Can you see my screen clearly? Because Leticia, I can see you. If you give me a good sign, good to go.
We can see you, but we can't see the presentation.
Oh, okay.
I think maybe because Sahar is highlighted, you shouldn't highlight maybe Sahar, so that her screen is up.
Should I do something?
No, that's good.
Yeah, you can see the slides?
Yes, yes.
Okay, wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the introduction. It's an absolute pleasure to be part of the webinar, to at least virtually feel a little bit connected to the colleagues and friends and a lot of collaborators, including colleagues from regional institutions and national institutions. I see the names who have been helping us with this project. And real pleasure to know that the research, the findings, and the thought that went to this work has been useful for APDIM for designing their programs. So I'm here to present the project on assessment of gaps and needs for disaster risk information and data management platforms in Asia and the Pacific region. First, would like to take a moment to acknowledge the expertise and the contribution and passion of the other members of the team. Robert Soden from University of Toronto. He helped with the risk data management platform piece. If all the colleagues please put yourself on mute? I don't know, Ava, if you can put everybody on mute. Because we are having two conversations at the same time. So yes, so Robert Soden from University of Toronto, he helped with the risk data management platform pieces of the project. Amin Shamseddini and Ava Bahrami from APDIM. Amin and Ava are at the webinar and you're going to hear from them. Robert couldn't join the webinar today because it's 1 a.m. in the morning for him in Toronto. I have 3 objectives in the next 15-20 minutes to give you a quick background and overview of the project scope, share with you some of the findings and the key results and findings and suggestions, but most importantly to basically give you a teaser of what is in this report to motivate you to go back, spend the time and read the report. There's a lot of detail and a lot of information in the report that I hope I can create the incentive for you with this presentation to go and read the details. So the main objective of the project was to understand challenges, gaps in the supply, and needs for risk information and risk data management in the region. The focus was at regional and national level needs, and the project had 4 components: researching existing hazard and risk data and information, researching existing risk data management platforms, assessing current supply and understanding the user's need, and defining the gaps between the supply and demand to define a strategic way forward. We looked at 12 hazards that are relevant to the regions. We looked at the impacts aligned with the Sendai framework, so life safety, affected people, displacement, basically, economic loss, and damage to buildings and critical infrastructure, as well as disruption to the critical infrastructure. So I want to clarify, this is the lens that we use to do our research. This is not necessarily what we found, but this is what we were after. Risk data is the term we are using at the presentation and at the report, but that is kind of like umbrella term for hazard, exposure, and risk data we were looking for. Datasets that we were interested in are datasets that have the coverage at regional or sub-regional level, and global and regional data platforms that could serve or are serving the users in the Asia and the Pacific region. For our research, we did extensive desktop research. We also used online survey for regional insights. At national level, we did our assessments for Iran, Tajikistan, Bangladesh, and Nepal. Originally, we had plans to do the national level assessment through a series of in-person interviews and research, researching different institutions at the national level. But because of the pandemic, right at the time that we had started planning our national missions, we had to pivot and change our format, and we used an extensive online questionnaire to do our national risk assessment, national needs assessments. We had series of interviews with our regional and national colleagues, practitioners, and researchers, and in total about 35 people provided us direct input in writing or through the interviews. Some of the colleagues spent time both in writing and took the time to talk to us. We are very much grateful to their time and inputs. In total, we reviewed 55 data sets with an extensive set of criteria, which we use for evaluating all the data sets, and 32 global and regional data management platforms. We wanted to look for platforms that can serve or are serving the Asia-Pacific region, but we also looked at that high number of data platforms because we wanted to learn from this research on the good approaches and the practices in design and maintenance of data management platforms. What works, what hasn't worked. So in total, we found 20 truly open data sets covering all Asia-Pacific region or a sub-region. In this graph, you can see for which hazards we found the open data sets. And by truly open, we meant the test was that we as a user could easily go in, not only see the data visually on the platform, but also be able to download it for further use. We also found 15, even though it was not part of it was not the focus, but as we were doing the research, we encountered 15 global live data sets monitoring hazards or post-disaster loss data sets. So I encourage you to go to the report to see more details about the title of every one of these 20 data sets and where you can find them, but also information about exposure data that is available for buildings and critical infrastructure. I think it's important to note that all those 20 data sets can be found on one or more of 5 global data platforms. GAR-15, which I think it was quite interesting. We are in 2021 now, but GAR-15 is still, in a sense, the latest multi-hazard global risk assessment. GEM data platform for the global earthquake risk model, World Resource Institute for global flood model, and GFDR Innovation Lab GeoNode platform for a series of hazards and risk assessments, and the PAC Geo for the Pacific region multi-hazard risk assessment. More details can be found in the report. And what did we learn from reviewing the risk data management platform? So based on that review, we came up with a set of characteristics for the good risk data management platforms. I have to say, even among the 5 that I already mentioned and many other good data platforms that we saw, we still really felt the design, like the graphic design and user interface and user experience is still not very strong and not very smooth. We also, based on our research and with great help from Robert Soden, we came up with guidance for design, implementation, and maintenance of data management platform. Again, you can find the details in the report, and I'm sorry, I would have needed like 4 hours, or as Leticia said, like 2 days of interactive fun workshop to really share and engage with the information. So I'm just really browsing and giving you an overview of what is available. Some of the high-level findings on challenges and gaps for risk information and use of risk information. These are the items that were mentioned by many of the colleagues, especially at the national level. Inefficient data sharing and data management is a huge burden in conducting hazard and risk assessments. There are major gaps, especially at local level, in hazard and risk information, both the type and the resolution, for it to be useful for disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation. The produced information doesn't normally provide the type of insight on risk drivers and evidence for risk reduction opportunity, which would encourage policy design and would inform policy design for risk management. There are no political, economic, or regulatory incentives for people and for institutions to use hazard and risk information in policy and programs. Information is not communicated effectively to non-technical stakeholders, and there is insufficient capacity among practitioners and decision makers to understand risk and use risk in their work. Actually, before I move on, another point that was raised by many of our national colleagues was that a lot of practitioners still have a hard time understanding how the science can actually help predict potential impacts from events that haven't happened yet. Most people, most practitioners, their brains still focused on post-disaster loss data, understanding and data from events that have already happened versus risk data. So based on those findings and many more detailed findings, we categorized the findings under 8 categories, which ranges from the need at national level for increasing the use and application of risk information in policy and programs, need to support countries to access and analyze existing data, or to conduct new and hazard and risk assessment where some capacity exists. Countries' need for enhancing their own risk data management platforms and governance at national level. Using Sendai framework as benchmark, it exposes significant gaps in the availability of many types of risk information. Like I don't know, at least I, based on many years of working with modelers and working with risk information, it was very insightful to actually put Sendai as a benchmark and look at what is available and see there's a huge gap in the amount of information, in the type of information that we need. I get into this point in a bit of detail later on. There are major gaps in hazard and risk data availability for drought and sand and dust storm, which APDIM has taken great leadership and great steps forward, and you're going to hear more after my presentation. Cross-boundary collaborations need collaborations need the support of regional institutions, not only at the technical level, but the feedback was that also at cultural level, working operations and political level, the support of regional institutions are needed. Risk information developed by international entities is very valuable. That was acknowledged by all the national entities, but there are challenges both at the national level for using the information, but also the international entities are facing certain challenges. Details are in the report. There is not one central platform for accessing risk data in Asia and the Pacific, and establishing such a platform could benefit national and regional actors. We heard that from many of the colleagues, especially at the regional level. Suggestions for the way forward. So based on those findings, we came up with few high-level suggestions, which I will share here on supporting countries in understanding risk for disaster risk reduction. But before I get to those suggestions, I wanted to just take a moment, take a step back and basically reiterate a concept basically that I think we are all aware of, but it's important to pause and remind ourselves. If you could please put yourself on mute. Thanks. Vulnerabilities and risks are created by a set of interlinked elements and circumstances. There is a reason, there is a driver, and there is a background, and sometimes decades, if not hundreds of years, are at the underlying driver of certain vulnerabilities and risks. And there is a legislative and administrative system for every disaster risk management measure at each level in every country. They might not be functional, they might be lacking resources and capacities, or they might be suffering from other governance issues, but some sort of legislative and administrative system exists in every country at every level, depending on the type of risk management that is needed. Both the risk and the risk management characteristics depend on the context of the built environment and that administrative, cultural, and political space, which is why it's extremely challenging to fully understand and identify. But there is some good news, and that's the fact that there are trends and similarities across countries. Let's say designing building codes and standards and enforcing them. The mechanism is quite similar between different countries. Details and nuances are different, but having a building code committee and how the hazard information is used to design the code, and then different levels and institutions that would take a role in enforcing them in design and construction is quite similar across the countries. So there is a lot that can be learned and be shared and be transferred by looking at each of the different vulnerability and risk types and the risk management types. But what is important is that we need to not lose sight of the context that we work in and understand the characteristics of the risk and risk management system and apply that knowledge in our work for reducing risk. I wanted to spend a minute to remind us of this, in the sense, way of looking at the problem that we are all working on. So with that background, the first suggestion is facilitate dynamic dialogue, collaboration, and co-design of initiatives and products by convening multidisciplinary teams from national, regional, and international entities. We need to understand people, the system that they function in, the tools and mechanisms that they use, and their incentives. And that is a complex process. It does need multidisciplinary teams. It does need collaborative and co-design way of thinking instead of one direction, either the solution coming from only from the science side or coming from the policy side. Like, there is a need for co-design and collaboration, but also many other experts and expertise need to come to the table. Support national entities to enhance national risk data governance, including support such as for designing and setting up legislations that require data sharing and use of data in certain projects, development of proper protocols and standards, sustainable funding, governance mechanism, understanding the data needs and maintaining sustainable demand and be able to respond to that demand. Issue of security was raised over and over, data security, but I think like in many of the conversation, we would get into the point mutually that sometimes there is a perception of security as an issue. So it is important to have a dialogue to really clarify and unpack the issue of security, and for the areas and the data that security is a true issue, come up with mechanisms to have the security that is needed. Establishing a national data management platform, helping the countries to set up their own national data management platform where the capacities exist. Setting up the national data management platform is not an easy task, is not a one solution providing a software to a one institution in the government and thinking that the problem is solved and then now they have a data management platform. It requires a whole governance system and mechanism for it to work and capacities to exist. So, but many countries are very close to have that capacity and they just need some support to set it up. And there are, again, details in the report on what kind of support for data management platform. More detail is available in the report. The third suggestion is to support the national and subnational science and policy, so both sides, the stakeholders on both sides, in conducting risk assessment, understanding risk information, and using risk information in policy and planning. To make this point more clear, I thought it's helpful to think of this whole process of producing risk information all the way to getting to the disaster and climate resilience, which is the main objective, to think of it as a series of chained activities. So starting with production of risk data and information, but then further analysis and creation of knowledge related to that problem, related to that context, and then communicating that knowledge, and then using that information and knowledge in policy and planning. The point is that the actors at every one of these steps are different. There are some commonalities, and again, with that whole mentality of co-design and collaboration, it is important to have multidisciplinary teams at the table at every one of the steps and having feedback loops right from the beginning, even at the pure scientific part of the exercise, all the way to the end. But I think sometimes we lose sight, and we have seen in a lot of projects that we also looked at, that the right people are not at the table and right expertise are not at the table and the right conversations are not happening. So facilitating and supporting the countries at every one of these steps with the right people at the table to build capacities. There's a lot of details and suggestions under the same suggestion 3. I don't have time to go through these details. I just want to spend a couple of minutes on the last point, which is promoting diagnostic risk assessment approach. Over the years, in various works and projects I've done, I have tried to use different language and have tried to articulate this in different ways. This is another attempt. I feel like this is a bit more articulated. So here's what I mean here. In most of the risk assessments, we receive information in maps or tables or charts on set of impact indicators, such as number of people killed or severely injured. This is an earthquake example. Sometimes we get some of the details, such as what kind of buildings are the main driver of that impact. For example, let's say X percentage, let's say 80% of people who could be killed in such an event are living in unreinforced masonry. This is already giving a lot of insight to better understand the underlying driver or the source of risk. Here I'm calling this source of risk. But it's important, and very rarely, we see assessments taking another step and peeling another layer of looking at what is the cause of risk or the underlying condition that has created that risk. So in this example, there is no seismic code or guideline in the country for designing and constructing masonry houses. So any reader, any user, let's say any policymaker or somebody who is in a position to be able to influence and take some action, once all this set of information is available, it gives insight to that person of where to start, where to look at, and what are the options. Like even though here, even the options for risk management are not provided, could be provided, but it's so simple, it's far simpler to be able to think about what kind of risk management measures can actually reduce creation of, or avoid creation of new risk by setting up a building code for the masonry buildings so that the newer buildings are not unreinforced masonry, or for example, like retrofitting existing one in order to tackle that impact. So this is what I mean here with diagnostic risk assessment. In a sense, it has some analogy with the health and the medical field also, that the indicator of number of people killed is basically the symptom. But in order to have a good treatment, you need more diagnostics of what is calling that, for example, headache or the pain that you have. Only saying to somebody you have severe pain, okay, communicating that there is severe pain is not sufficient to come up with a good treatment. In this case, coming up with a good risk management measure. Fourth suggestion, mobilize global and regional expertise and resources to strategize for closing the gaps in hazard and risk information available for risk reduction. So this is going back to the point, to that finding, and here I'm outlining some of it, that we use the Sendai as a benchmark, and based on that, there are significant gaps in availability of many types of risk information. Most countries have some sort of earthquake and flood information, but on the other hazards, there is significant gap. For smaller urban zones, semi-urban and rural, major gaps there. Not much studies and assessments done for displacement at subnational level and for probable and extreme scenarios. This is extremely useful for emergency response, shelter planning, and recovery planning. Critical infrastructure damage, disruption, and interdependencies, where the information is available, and as a result, also understanding complete economic losses of potential future events, not available. Information on socioeconomic vulnerabilities and the unequal impacts of disaster on most vulnerable groups. There are not many. There has been some studies and research, but like in a format that is useful for community resilient planning, for social programs, not available. Appropriate resolution of hazard and risk data for use at the local level, which majority of risk management and climate change adaptation measures and policies happen at local level. The right resolution and right type of data is not available. Last suggestion, and I know I am over time, but I'm almost done. Invest in the design, implementation, and maintenance of a regional risk data platform. Many of the colleagues, especially at the regional level, they indicated the importance and value of having a risk data platform. We are proposing three options, three approaches. One is APDIM risk data platform for APDIM, for the data sets that APDIM produces by outsourcing or in-house. This is the approach that a lot of institutions have. Like they are risk modeling entity, they have their own platform to host their own data. Approach two is APDIM and partners risk data platform. So APDIM and trusted partners together have a data platform and they host the data produced by them. And the third is a regional, in a sense, open risk data platform for facilitating open data sharing by all users. Pros and cons, even personal opinion I have among them, but that has been left out. Pros and cons are presented in the report. Final points, and some of it is in a sense reiterating the main points. the demand for risk information is still very low. This was indicated by many of the national colleagues, and I think it's very, very insightful. And the reason for that is disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation are yet not integrated into sectors' policy design, planning, and operations. So in a sense, full-on governance issue. The value of risk information and its applications in disaster risk reduction and development policies are not well understood. Some national colleagues were saying there is more advances among the policymakers to appreciate data and even modeling, but more needs to be done to help them understand the value of disaster risk modeling. The weak connection between science and policy is a barrier for aligning objectives and approaches and communication of risk between the two entities with the objective of risk reduction. A lot of risk assessments are done only with the lens of research and with the objective of doing the best model, scientific model and scientific work possible. Whereas for objective of risk reduction, different characteristics of assessment and work might be needed. Most risk assessments don't diagnose the causes of risk and are not accompanied by risk reduction options or do not evaluate the performance of those options. Such information could bring a great insight for decision makers and incentivize them for making the decisions on investing in risk reduction. Thank you so much. Again, great pleasure to be with you today at this webinar. You can find the report on APDIM's website or use this QR code that will take you directly to the report on APDIM website. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sahar, for the presentation. And indeed, do download or access the full report. And as we noted in the title, and we just saw a comment in the chat, it's a preliminary assessment. So we very much look forward to continuing to update the information it contains and expand the range of consultations that we do with the government, including very much we look forward with the government of Bangladesh who just came in. And I take this opportunity also to acknowledge, I'm very pleased, I think we are like almost 100 participants, we are over 96 or 97 right now. And I would like to acknowledge also amongst our participants the presence of several senior government officials from the region, including Mr. Mohammed Qasim Haidari, the Deputy Minister for Planning, Policy and Coordination in Afghanistan, Mr. Shah Mohammed Nasim, the Additional Secretary in Planning and Development in the Ministry of Disaster Management and Relief of Bangladesh. Sir, thank you for your comment. I saw it and very much taking on board your suggestions and recommendations. And also, Mr. Anil Pokharel is the Chief Executive and National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Authority in the government of Nepal, who has, amongst others, also worked on and contributed their knowledge and expertise and insight to this initial overview that we did. And so maybe if I see Anil on well, see amongst 100 participants and my tiny little screen, but sir, I think you are somewhere there. Anil, if you would like to turn on your video and share with us some reflections on the outcome, on the findings of the study, we would very much appreciate it. Anil, you there?
Thank you so much. I hope I'm visible and I'm audible.
Yes, you are. Welcome.
Yes. Thank you so much. So many thanks for APDIM for organizing this sharing webinar and for allowing us to be part of it. Thanks also to Sahar and the entire team at APDIM who were behind the preparation of this report, hosting numerous meetings and dialogues across multiple time zones, and to come up with this report. We have been informed by the APDIM Secretariat on the report, and we are actually again sharing it with we shared it with the NDMA team here in Nepal. I'm yet to get their reflections as well. We'll be happy to kind of share our thoughts on it, but really been pleased to be part of this process and to learn from the key findings in terms of setting up national and subnational risk information, disaster risk information platforms. So we'll be happy to, we'll be pleased to kind of share our comments on it. There's the initial observations that we've been able to understand is very much helpful in terms of taking it forward. NDMA in Nepal has been a very recent setup. It's only been just over 12 months. And so we're basically working on collating available risk information. What we have is a risk information portal called bipad.portal.gov.np. Bipad is disaster risk in Nepali, and so we've used a Nepali term to it. And so our effort, interestingly, earlier this week, the National Executive Committee, headed by the Honorable Minister of Home Affairs, made a decision to reach out to every ministries and departments, including other development partners, NGOs and INGOs, to request for all risk information in shareable formats. But it also includes, the decision also includes requesting information on whatever has been done on hazard, on vulnerability, on exposure, socioeconomic surveys down to a municipal level. So whatever information is there to provide us a copy of that. We wanted to undertake a stock taking of, again, what are the formats, what are the resolution, whether it's open shareable, whether it's in open shareable formats or not. Based on that, we would be able to make an informed decision in terms of hosting these data and this information, again using the same national portal. And so this is where these findings done by APDIM and this team is of critical importance in taking this idea of having the risk information hosted at a national level, but more importantly, given the Act of Nepal, the Disaster Risk Reduction Management Act, needs to look at the federal level, the provincial level, and the local level, and also the district level for disaster response. This is where we need to think of multiple administrative boundaries, and so that they are able to take decisions. So this is something that we've been able to share, interact with the APDIM team, including Sahar, Robert Sodden, and the entire team. So this is where we would like to continue this dialogue and then see how APDIM would be of support to us in terms of taking this idea down to a municipal level. So very timely, and looking forward to working with you all. I'll stop here, and we'll be happy to kind of come back if there's any questions, be part of this process. Thank you so much to the entire team. I'll stop here. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Anil. And as I had taken a moment to welcome our participants and government representative participants from the region, I have to also most warmly acknowledge the presence of many government participants from our host country, APDIM's host country, Iran. We have representatives from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Planning and Budget Organization, and several other organizations that we collaborate with and support our work from a substantive perspective. So much. APDIM is very lucky to be in a country with such strong technical expertise in the field of risk reduction, and to be able to draw on that and work with that kind of also stimulus to do always better is great. So with that, I would like to see if there are comments. I can see that some are pouring through my telephones and some in the chat line. So yes, we have a question from, in fact, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Iran, Mr. Golriz, has a question for Sahar. So, sir, if you would like to turn on your mic and ask your question. And the video too would be great. You're still muted, sir. Mr. Golriz, we cannot see you or hear you yet. There you go. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Good morning and good afternoon to everybody. I would like to thank very much the APDIM for organizing this meeting, and I am surprised to see that such a large audience, and it shows the importance of the topic of the meeting. I have actually a question regarding the second slide, if the distinguished presenter could go back to that. And the slide is about the hazard and risk data availability. And while I was looking at the slide, and I was seeing yes. Actually, I could not digest the legend of this slide, but what I understand from it, because it is about the data availability, and I see the standard loss forms and chart at the end of the list. In fact, I am from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Iran, and I'm dealing with the environment, specifically with the standard loss forms and chart. And my presumption is that because there has not been data available for the standard and dust forms and chart, it has not been reflected in this slide. So I was wondering about the if there's any mechanism for gathering the data of the countries, member states of the APDIM, because I know that the Department of Environment have had a large number of studies, and they have gathered a very good bank of information and data. And I don't know whether or not anybody is present from the Department of Environment, but what I know is that they have a lot of data available for them, and it is very important for deciding on how to collaborate and cooperate in the region to address the sand and dust storms. Those data are very important, and I think that if there has been a mechanism of gathering the information or data for the sand and dust storms in the region, there has not been to submitting them to a mechanism which there is for banking them or classifying them into this chart. So if there is anything which could add to my knowledge on this slide, please let me know. I thank you so much.
Sure, I can start with a clarification and then pass it on to Amin and then other speakers who are going to talk about sand and dust storm. The clarification I want to make is that we went after hazard modeling and risk modeling data. So on sand and dust storm and many other hazards, and as you can see on the right side, the clarification, like a small note, there is a lot of data sets that are either monitoring ongoing changes in hydromet or rainfall or wind or dust concentrations live, or there are data sets that have collected the data post-event. So those, while we saw them and kind of took note of them, were not the focus of the study. Like the modeling that can provide insights of potential, like from distribution to intensity of different hazards and then impacts were the focus. And that's what you are seeing here. Otherwise, absolutely agree. And we were aware, and I know Amin can shed more light of the data and information on sand and dust storm that is available from Ministry of Environment in Iran and few other institutions across the region.
Thank you.
Thank you. And sir, you are in a way giving us a perfect segue to the next topic. But first I would like to, because we will focus on that in the next segment of our webinar, In the meantime, I want to make sure that no one else would like to come in or ask questions or clarifications to Sahar, or Amin Shamsedini, who also worked with Sahar on this, and he's also online. But Sahar is the lead author, of course. And Horst, I see Horst Kremers from Codeta, Germany, would like to ask a question. Horst, it's very nice to see you, and please do, well, I don't see you yet, but I'm sure you will turn your video on soon.
No, that I'm very sorry that that video doesn't work at the moment.
All right, no worries.
But,
go ahead.
And I have it's a pleasure to meet you and colleagues again after meeting in Geneva Global Platform. My question or remark to Sahar is just three very quickly. You talked about benchmarking against the Sendai framework text. I think it would be more easy to understand for a lot of people if you call it auditing, because that auditing is a formal process, and there are really management techniques and practices about doing so. We don't have that at the moment with the Sendai framework, but I favor a lot if that would be possible. To call it an auditing, and not just to have you know about these national reports that are on the table nowadays or so. It's all very helpful, very nice, but in the final stage, a management aspect would say, what is the audit against this? That even could be done independently, not only by peer people. And the thing is, what I say, the scientists, you say they are involved at the moment, and you talk about the disconnection between administration and scientists. Well, this is absolutely crucial, but I think it shouldn't be in the near future. It shouldn't be that big problem, because so many administration people are aware that they have to work together with the scientists. And you see, I'm working in science and I have an administration background too. And I say, well, the scientists, they have the good ideas, but in final, the administration people are in charge of doing it. And they have so much data their own, administrative data on urban planning, on whatsoever. It's not called science data. So I think they should come to the same table. I think that is also your idea to plan for, and sit on the same table and look for interoperability of these data. And that also would look for the future to make the whole process of data management a mandatory one. Not just a scientific one. It happens as far as you get the resources for projects. But what we are talking about is not a project. Data management of that style is a big thing, and it needs to have administrative background to work as everyone and our people want it. Not just we want it, our people want it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Horst, for your comments. Sahar, maybe if you don't mind, we'll take a few more questions. And in the meantime, I take the opportunity to let you know that in the chat line, you will find a link throughout the meeting. We'll post it now and you will see it coming up later as well, for you to leave us your email, full name, title, as well as some feedback, a quick feedback evaluation on this webinar that will help us to plan the next one. So I think Ava just popped the link for the Google form for you to do the evaluation at your convenience throughout the duration of the webinar. So Animesh, Animesh Kumar from the UNDRR office of the Asia Pacific, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Thanks, Letizia. Good to hear from you. Happy New Year, and very good to hear from you and see you, Sahar, after quite some time. Thanks for the very nice presentation, very comprehensive, and it really aligns well with the current discourse that we're having in the systemic risk analysis at the global level. I don't have a question, but just a comment picking up the point you made towards the end on the lack of demand for risk information and risk knowledge. And that takes us back to the discussion, Letizia, if you remember, in November when we had those consultations with APDIM. the key point that emerged was, one of the key points that emerged was, unless we show the application, the demonstration, how this information can be used by the non-converts, by the people who are not the conventional disaster managers, we will not be able to create that demand. So sometimes it's more about beyond capacity building or awareness raising. It's simply showing what the use is. Very recently, we have also done some analysis. We call it the disaster needs analysis for the disaster loss databases, Sahar, part of which you have worked on in the past. It comes out very clearly that the primary producers of data and the primary users of data are not the same, and it happens in multiple domains. Similarly, when we talk about the multi-sector approach to disaster risk management, essentially what comes out is that more needs to happen beyond the conventional disaster management domain if we really are serious about strengthening disaster risk reduction. And similarly, like if we really are serious about meeting this demand and supply, we'll have to simply demonstrate, simply because people would use what they know. If they don't know, they will not use it. So that's just a comment on the last part on the demand. Thank you very much, but very interesting report and presentation.
Thank you, Animesh. And indeed, you were referring to, and I can maybe clarify for all our friends in the call, you were referring to conversations that we were having with some of our partners, more in-depth, about how to translate the findings from this preliminary assessment and to inform, amongst others, looking also at the comprehensive review that APDIM underwent last year, and how could those findings really help us inform our program, which they have to quite a large extent. I see there are a few other hands up. Maybe Tim, I see Tim also from the UNDRR Asia Pacific office. Tim, if you don't mind, shall I go first to other friends and colleagues from other organizations, and then I'll come back to you. So first I would like to ask Saviz Sehat, if you could like to introduce yourself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My name is Saviz Sehat. Actually, I'm the faculty member of Atmospheric Science and Meteorological Research Center.
Do you mind?
Can you hear me?
Yes, if you screen just a little bit, tilt your screen so we can see you better.
Is it better now?
Yes, it's better.
Actually, I'm the representative of Iran Meteorological Organization, and at the outset, I just wanted to express my gratitude for organizing such a great webinar. In order to support Mr. Goldry's comments, actually, I just wanted to mention that during the previous 3 years, we have the honor to collaborate actually very effectively with the Department of Environment. I can see the representative's name among the guests. I just wanted to point out, during several ministerial acts, one of them, for example, the Clean Air Act, and the others, actually, Iran Meteorological Organization, with collaboration with Department of Environment, started several national, let's say, projects, including dust source identification, firstly on the national and then on the regional scales. And then we had, let's say, the dust workshop that even I could see the name of Professor Middleton. Also, he actually attended in our workshop, and the outputs are ready. I'm sure that Mr. Shamsuddin would add some notes on this, but the data are available. Actually, Atmospheric Science and Meteorological Research Center worked effectively, on this item, and now we are just working on the action plan for the regional countries. And also, I could see Dr. Human Mohamed among the guests. He is also from the, let's say, from the Research Center for Disaster Risk Management. He's doing this part of our project, and we are working collaboratively. And the outputs are available. You can actually follow the results by Dr. Tam Hasabi office, who is the representative of, let's say, the National Committee for the Sand and Dust Storm, let's say, team. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Saviz, for your comment. And indeed, I can already pick up the vibe of the great interest for the next topic for discussion. But we have, I think, Rajesh, our colleague Rajesh, who had his hand up. Rajesh Sharma. Rajesh, would you like to turn your video on? From
Yes.
UNDP. Rajesh, your floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you so much, Leticia, and good to see you, Mustafa, and several other colleagues from APDIM online. As a UNDP representative, I mean, I have been participating and contributing to several discussions of APDIM over the last couple of years. So it's good to see this webinar and a lot of very serious technical discussions through Sahar's presentation. And as someone who has worked with several countries in setting up disaster loss and damage databases, I fully concur with a lot of findings which she has come out with. There are issues with quality of data, data collection issues, a lot of challenges with the capacities, etc. I just want to make two important points. One is on utilization of data in terms of development planning in the countries. And we had done a project in partnership with the Asian Development Bank in Southeast Asia, where we were looking at what kind of risk information is available in the countries. And whatever is available, every country has something available at some resolution. What is available, is it being used? And we looked at it specifically in the road sector. And what we found that the processes where they make decisions, government makes decisions in terms of where the public money should be invested, those processes do not consider any kind of climate or disaster risk. So that's one part of it, because unless those processes require this information, it's not going to be useful. Doesn't matter how good quality data we have, how thorough data we have, how very authentic data we have. So, I mean, we have to work on both sides, make the information available in a variety of ways to all decision makers, all sectors, so that they are able to make use of it. So that's one point out. Second point, I think within the context of COVID-19, within UNDP, I mean, all of us are struggling with this challenge of COVID-19, the kind of challenge it has posed to various countries around the world. And we have been thinking, whatever we have been doing in terms of risk reduction, is it enough? Are we covering enough thematic areas? And to respond to this question, because we just don't need to look at disaster climatics, we also need to look at, for example, a health risk and also conflict associated risk, etc. So we are hosting a discussion on risk-informed development. What is it that we should be looking for? Because it's not enough to look at current risk only, it's also required that we try to anticipate future risk. COVID-19 is a very good example. So we also need to sort of build the capacities and both on technical front and also in terms of utilization on those fronts, so that we are able to anticipate those future risks and try to plan and undertake measures in advance. So these were the two important points I wanted to just add to the discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rajesh, for contributing and coming in. I see Tarek Sadek, who's a colleague from UNESCAP, from the Executive Commission for West Asia, who raised an interesting question. Are there good practices on national platforms for disaster risk information that link concerned institutions dealing with disasters, climate, environment, meteorologic, civil defense, municipality? It's such an interesting point, and one that, in fact, Sahar, I'm sorry, I'm stealing your floor for a second. It's one, in fact, that it is very much raised in Sahar's assessment, and one that we have taken on board with a view to support, as there is demand, as there is interest of specific countries, to provide whatever technical support we can to establish, facilitate the sharing of data across different institutions. I think there was one last hand up, if it's still up, from Tim. I'm just double checking. Tim, do you want to have, go ahead. Do you want to raise your point? Tim Wilcox, sorry, from the UNDRR Asia Pacific office.
Yeah, no, thanks for squeezing me in. No, it's just more of a comment about suggestion number 5 on a new database. I'd be interested to have further chats and with APDIM about this, about the suggestion to create a new central platform for risk data. It's very interesting, and I think, you know, if the partners in the region feel that's important, I think it's important to examine that further. But I think we would also be interested to know more about how this might align with existing regional and national damage and loss databases, particularly how to reduce burden on countries to report that data to APDIM. For example, the Sendai Framework Monitor asks countries to report data on the Sendai Framework, and we've been working on that for a few years now, but a lot of the challenges there are actually countries don't have the data to put it into the system. And there's also some work being done in the region, say, for example, in the Pacific, with the creation of a new revised Pacific damage and loss database. So exploring the alignments to that and how we can support each other, and maybe how, maybe systems can speak to each other to try and reduce burden to countries and reporting. That'd be great. Thanks.
Thank you for raising it. We have given a great amount of consideration to that point, and it allows me also to perhaps share some of the way forward that APDIM is going to take on this issue. We will not ask countries to, the last thing we want to do is add additional reporting burdens on countries, but we do wish to consolidate whatever is available out there in a way that is easily accessible and usable. And with that, we have, I see 2 more hands up. We have 2 other presentations specifically focused on sand and dust storms coming up. So I would like also to remind you of that we can discuss some of those points coming up. But I see Deputy Minister Haderi from Afghanistan who has raised his hand. So it's my pleasure to, sir, give you the floor.
Thank you, Lizia. So I had some comment and question. I think is covered by Mr. Animation, Mr. Thame. So that was the platform that now UNDR have is the Sendai monitoring system online. So this is a very good gathering of the data for all the country can use it. So I think it's already solved in covered by Letizia. So I forgot to not raise my hand in the system. Thank you.
No worries. It's a good opportunity to say hello and welcome you to the meeting. All right. So Sahar, would you like to wrap up this this item? So I keep raising my own hands as I try to look at who is speaking, who's next on the list. Would you like to, Sahar, any final thoughts, conclusion?
No, Leticia, I think like a lot of the comments we heard, which was wonderful, especially from all colleagues and friends, was just re-emphasizing basically the points that we have made and articulating, sometimes in some cases better than me. So that was wonderful. I just want to clarify and remind everybody once again, there is a difference between post-disaster loss data that is used for monitoring Sendai framework and risk data. So this study that I worked on, I know APDIM is concerned about all kinds of data, but this study that I worked on is on the risk data. So I think it's also, this is another point that we should constantly keep in mind, and in our communications also distinguish between the two, while both provide information and insights, but it's important to, when it comes to operations, it's important to distinguish the difference. That's all, and just thanks to all of you. Wonderful to be part of it and see a lot of colleagues and friends. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Letizia, sorry, a question from Esco. If you may check the comment on chat box, please. Yeah.
Yes. Hi, Marlene. Is the database geospatially based? Are there plans to link with climate change modeling outputs? I'm not sure which database you refer to in the question, Marlene. Do you want to come in and clarify your question?
Hello, hi. It looked like, I haven't read the report or anything, but it looked like from one of the slides you had some sort of platform they had the data consolidated. It looked like it was geospatial, but it was unclear. So I don't know if this is clarified in the report.
So we researched the available data management platforms, And all the data sets, actually all of these model hazard and risk models are geospatial, and all the data sets are available on these, in the report has the details, the name of the data platforms that are hosting all these available data sets, and they're all geospatial, yes.
Is your platform, is it available live to review, or is it still kind of under development before you release it?
Sahar, I think there's a confusion between what you reviewed and what we plan to do next.
Exactly.
So what I think Marlene is asking about is what we plan to do next, and which is linked to Tim's point earlier about not asking countries to report, but consolidate existing information. And that's very much what we plan to do in the course of 2021 and go and have it ready by next year. And that will be geospatially based eventually. Okay. So we're getting there.
Okay, and then link with climate change data, or just historical events?
As far as possible, yes. It will also be looking ahead. But as I said, we're working on it. Work in progress.
Very exciting. Thank you very much.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you for raising the question and allowing us to clarify this. All right, so thank you, Rajesh, for sharing the additional contribution on where to find the additional information. With this, Sahar, thank you so much. I know it's very late in your part of the world, and it's great that technology allows us.
Another actually hand raised actually from Mr. and Firon. It is your if
oh, sorry, I did not see. My apologies. Sorry, let me go back. Sorry. Ali Reza Jirani Ahmabad, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, and good morning and good afternoon for the colleagues and friends from different parts of the world. I cannot recognize, which one is the day and which one is the night, but I appreciate all colleagues and friends for the valuable presentation. First of all, please allow me to extend my appreciation for the valuable presentation by Ms. Sahar. In the final points, I got a point that Ms. Sahar provided us with a very valuable slide saying the value of the risk information and its application in DRR and development policies are not well understood. This is quite right, because it meets exactly to priority 1 of the Sendai framework, understanding disaster risk, and also priority 2, strengthening disaster risk governance to manage disaster risk. My question is that this is the key issue that as far as the understanding does not happen, then how can we move forward? Because data is working now as a fuel or something like that that can be used as a multidimensional aspects in different in different purposes. My question is that bearing in mind that there is no one size fits for all, and this data collection and data bank that is very valuable, how can they be organized through the workshops for the countries? Is there any plan, for the country by country to give a hand to them to collect this data in order? Because if we have this step, then we can move to second step to streamline, that data into the policy level. I thank you.
Sahar, do you want me to answer on the plans for APDIM, or do you want to take it from a policy perspective?
All I can say is that a lot of thoughts and ideas, because it's a systemic problem, right? Like I mentioned it, and many of the colleagues also mentioned, and I think we all understand it's a systemic problem. It needs a systemic solution, and it will be gradual. It will take decades. But there are many angles and aspects that has to be addressed. And it's just, I think it's important that for many years we were only thinking of understanding risk as a scientific exercise, whereas now we are understanding that if we want the scientific exercise to even advance, and really use the information for policy. There is a lot we need to work on the policy and practitioners side. So a lot of thoughts and ideas the details are in the report. So please spend time to read that. And I would be very happy if you connect with me or through APDIM colleagues, provide your further inputs. Laetitia, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sahar. Maybe just to add that indeed APDIM has plans going forward, working with countries directly who do ask for such a technical support to facilitate, as I was referring to earlier, the sharing of data at national level in a way that fits that particular country's governance, owns institutions, governance, etc. arrangements. I see that more comments or contributions come through the chat line, so please do look up links that colleagues share with us. And thank you so much also from Afghanistan again. And with that, I think we can now, thank you, Sahar. Again, it's super late where you are, so thank you so much. With that, we can move on to the next